my yarny friends, I'm Sara, and welcome back to my crochet channel. Today's video is our October stitch of the month, and the stitch that we're going to be learning today has several names. Sometimes it's called clever blocks. Sometimes it's called reversible blocks because it looks the same on both sides. Another name for it is staggered blocks, and it's also been called three color blocks. So it has lots of different names, but it's a fun pattern to learn. It makes a nice thick washcloth or hot pad. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to make this particular washcloth, but I'm going to use it as a doily. I'm going to set my ceramic pumpkin that I put a little bit of candy in on mine. It makes a great decorative touch to any of your holiday decorations. Now, I'm making this in Halloween colors. That's why we called it the Wicked Washcloth. But this would be beautiful in red, white, and blue. It would be beautiful in green, maybe yellow and red for Christmas, beiges and oranges for fall. You can use this to make just about any project that you want, a nice thick project. You can use this stitch for scarves, hats, bags, placemats, lots of different things, and it even makes a really nice warm blanket or a baby blanket or maybe a lap blanket. So it's a really, really wonderful stitch pattern to learn. This particular washcloth is going to measure about 10 by 10 with this fun little trim that we're going to add on. But if you don't want to make the washcloth, it's a great swatch to make to practice learning this pattern. Now you can find this pattern written out with lots of pictures on my blog, and as always, you can find that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. To make our Clever Blocks crochet pattern washcloth, you're going to need some medium weight number 4 yarns. Now, because I'm using mine as a little doily to set my little glass pumpkin on, I'm going to be using just my basic acrylic yarns that I have in my yarn stash. You can also use cotton or cotton blends or wool or whatever yarns that you want to and that you prefer for your washcloths or doilies or whatever project that you're going to make. I like using the acrylic for the doily because it washes up nice, and I'm not going to get any of that shrinkage that you get with a cotton yarn because I'm not using it as a washcloth. But you can, of course, and any of your cottons or cotton blends will work just fine. The main thing is you're going to need a little less than an ounce of 4 different colors. And I used black on this one. I'm going to be using this charcoal gray with my bright green, my beautiful purple, and my bright orange. For a similar look, I'm going to do the colors in a different order, but it's still going to be very Halloween-y. We're going to be working our pattern today with an eye hook, which is a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, and then you'll need your scissors and a needle for weaving in those ends. We're going to be using 3 colors to do the main portion of our pattern. And so I'm going to start with my green, but I've got my other 2 colors ready to go. All right, now the way the pattern works is we're going to be stitching 29 chains for the washcloth. But if you want to make it bigger or smaller, you need to do that in multiples of 6 chains plus 5 for your multiples. All right, so let's get started. I'm starting with my bright green, and I'm going to chain 29 chains. Now remember, when you do your beginning chain, make sure you chain it a little bit loosely, because if it's too tight when you go to finish up, one end of your washcloth might be a little bit tighter than the other end. So just to stay on the safe side, we're going to stitch our 29 chains just a little bit loose. I have chained my 29 chains. They're a little bit loose, and we're going to begin by stitching a double crochet in the 4th chain from the hook. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over and go through the next 2, and then we'll double crochet in the next chain. The chain 3 here counts as our first double crochet, and then we stitched 2 more. Now we're going to chain 3, 1, 2, 3. We're going to skip 3 chains, 1, 2, 3, and stitch 1 double crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're going to repeat that. Chain 3, skip 3, 1, 2, 3, and double crochet and double crochet in the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, and repeat. 3 chains, skip 3, 1, 2, 3, and double crochet in the next 3 stitches. 1, 2, and 3. And we'll do it one more time. Chain 3, skip 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1 double crochet in those last 3 chains. 1, 2, and 3. And this is the way that your first row should look. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of 3 double crochets and 4 sets of chain 3 and skip 3. And of course, if you've added more chains to make it bigger, you're going to have, of course, more stitches. This is the size that we're doing for our swatch or washcloth. So for row 2, we're going to bring in our second color. And we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. Make sure you do that chain 3 after you do your color change. We're going to leave our color 1 attached. We're going to turn our work. We're going to let that color 1 just drop. It's still attached, but we're not going to work with it on this row. And for row 2, we're going to skip these 3 double crochets, and we're going to double crochet down here in these 3 that we skipped, going over this. All right, so the way that works is I'm going to come down here to that first skipped chain, lay this out so you can see better, and stitch my double crochet around that chain 3. And we'll do this 2 more times. Yarn over, go in that chain that we skipped, pull that yarn through, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. So we chained 3 and we skipped these first 3 double crochets, and then we made our double crochets down here in these chains that we skipped, stitching over that chain 3. So now we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll repeat that here. Double crochet in these 3 skipped chains going around that chain 3. Now you'll need to be just a little bit loose in your stitching when you're going around that chain 3 because we want it to lay pretty. We don't want it to be all tight and bunched up. All right. Chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. Double crochet in those 3 skipped chains, going around the chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. All right, we'll do it one more time. Chain 3, stitch a double crochet in those 3 skipped chains going around our chain 3. Now this particular row is a little clumsy, so just take your time and it will work out, I promise. So now we've repeated this across our row, and that leaves us with these 3 double crochets. So we're going to chain 3, and then we're going to slip stitch in the top of that last stitch. And this is the way that row 2 should look. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chain 3s and 4 sets of our 3 double crochets that we stitched down in those chains around our chain 3s. Now we're going to bring in our third color, which I'm using this bright orange. And you're going to leave your purple or color 2 and your green or color 1 still attached. Now we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and turn our work. Now, one thing that can happen is your yarn can get just a little bit of twisted because we're changing colors every row. But just take your time, untwist everything as you go. We've chained 3, and now what we're going to do is we're going to skip this first double crochet and stitch over that chain 3 and stitch a double crochet in the next 2 stitches. 1 and 2, going over that chain 3 and stitching in the double crochet from the previous row. Chain 3, 1, 2, 3. Now we'll come over here and we'll stitch 1 double crochet in each of these 3 double crochets, stitching over this chain 3 like we did before. The only difference is we're putting them in double crochets, not in the chains, okay? So we'll come down here and stitch in this double crochet going around that chain 3. And we'll do that in these 3 double crochets. So it's really the same. The only difference is we're not stitching in the chains, we're stitching in the double crochets. All right, let me get some more yarn out here. So chain 3, 1, 2, 3, and we'll stitch 1 double crochet in these 3 double crochets, stitching around this chain 3. And chain 3. And repeat. 1, 2, 3, and chain 3. This brings us to those last 3 stitches. And we'll just finish off with 1 double crochet in those 3 double crochets, stitching over that chain 3. Gonna go in that chain 3 there. There we go. And this is how that row 3 should look. Our chain 3 here counted, scoot this down here. Our chain 3 here counted as our first double crochet, and we stitched 1 double crochet in the next 2. stitching over that chain 3. Chain 3, we skip these 3 double crochets and stitch 3 double crochets in the previous row over the chain 3. So now we're going to bring back in our color 1. We'll leave our color 3 attached, and we're going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And we're turning our work again, leaving everything attached. Just make sure it's out of the way. We're going to skip these 3 double crochets and double crochet in these 3 double crochets down here, going over that chain 3. There's 2 and 3. Chain 3, skip the 3 double crochets and double crochet around that chain 3 and the double crochets from that previous row. One, 2, 3. Skip those 3 and stitch 1 double crochet over that chain 3 and the 3 double crochets from the previous row. And chain 3 and repeat. We're at the end, those last 3, so we chained 3 and we're going to slip stitch in that chain 3. And that's how row 4 should look. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chain 3s and 1, 2, 3, 4 sets of our 3 double crochets. All right, so let's do row 5. We're going to bring in our color 2. And chain 3. 1, 2, and 3. We're going to turn our work, make sure all the colors we're not using are out of the way because we're using our color 2. We're going to skip this chain 3 and stitch 1 double crochet in the next 2, going over that chain 3 and stitching in the double crochets from the previous row. And chain 3. Some more yarn out here. We'll skip those 3 double crochets and stitch the next 3 double crochets from the previous row, stitching again over our chain 3. And chain 3. And repeat. Chain 3, 1 double crochet in the 3 double crochets from the previous row, stitching over our chain 3. Go, chain 3, and then we finish off with our last 3 double crochets, again stitching in the previous row and over our chain 3. Alrighty, some of this yarn out of the way so we can see. There we go. And so that's row 5. And so now you can see that basically what we're doing is we're alternating row 2 and row 3, which is what we did on row 4 and row 5. We repeated row 2 and we repeated row 3. And so what you'll do is you'll continue to repeat row 2 and row 3 for 13 additional rows. So you have a total of 18 rows. Okay, and you're going to be changing colors every row, alternating your 3 colors. So we're going to repeat row 2 and row 3 for 13 more rows, alternating our colors every row. I continued to repeat row 2 and row 3 after we did those first 5 for 13 additional rows, so I have 18 rows. Now, some people get confused on counting your rows on this particular pattern. So the way you count it is I start over here and I sort of cover this so that I don't see it. And you count like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18 rows. And I thought I'd show you that because people are always like, how do I count these rows on this? Now, I also wanted to show you on the sides where I carried my colors on both sides. And I do have a lot of weaving in to do. But one thing we're going to do now is we're going to do the trim, and we're going to be stitching over those edges, and we can also stitch over some of our edges of our where we need to weave in, and then we'll come back in and tidy it up a little bit more. All right, so I'm going to use this charcoal gray color for my trim. We want to have a nice smooth single crochet edge around all 4 sides of our washcloth, but we don't want these holes to be here. And so the way we'll do that, I'm going to go ahead and chain 3. We're going to go ahead and do our 2 double crochets in those 2 double crochets from the previous row. And now we're going to single crochet in these 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3. Then we'll double crochet in those 3 like we've been doing. And this is the way that I would trim this if I was doing a hat or a scarf or even a blanket, just to get a nice even row of single crochet around all 4 sides of it, whatever I am making. And this is going to give us a nice smooth edge. All right, so we'll continue this across here, and then I'll show you how to do those sides. So once you've stitched across the top, brings us to our first corner. We're going to single crochet in that double crochet right at the top there. So let's chain 1, single crochet, and then we'll just start working down the side of our washcloth or blanket or whatever you're making. I'm going to hold that stitch over. I'm also stitching over all of my sides where I trailed up my yarn, and this is going to give it a nice pretty edge. One thing to remember, yes, we're stitching over all those yarns we trailed up and some of our yarn where we're weaving in, and I do 3 or 4 of those and then I just let it drop, and I'll come back in with my needle and weave that in some more. All right, and the thing is, when you're coming down the side here, you want to try to stitch in the sides of those stitches and not in the holes if you can help it. Now there might be times where you do have to place a stitch in a hole, but you want to try to make it nice and even on both sides. And yes, we'll weave that in, it'll be out of the way. And actually, when I was first learning to crochet, one of the hardest things to learn is how to do an evenly stitched trim. And really the trick is just to take your time and eyeball it. So I've got a purple one here and I've got a green one here, so I'm going to lay those across as well and stitch over those. And again, I'll come back in with my needle and weave over those, or weave those in as well. All right, so now I'm down to the corner. I'm going to stitch 3, so there's 1, 2, 3 single crochets, and then I'm going to go ahead and stitch across the bottom. Okay, but let's take a look at this. Here's this edge. Looks nice and neat. We stitched over some of our yarn, and we'll go ahead and when we finish, we'll just weave these in, make it nice and neat. And it's really important that you weave in good because, you know, securely, because this is going to probably get washed a lot, especially if you're going to use it as a washcloth. And you want those ends to stay in. So I completed stitching evenly single crochets all the way around, placing 3 single crochets in each of the corner. Then I joined here, and I'm going to chain 3. 1, 2, 3. So we chained 3. We're going to stitch 2 double crochets in this same single crochet as that chain 3. We're going to skip 2 stitches and slip stitch in the next stitch and repeat. Chain 3 and 2 double crochets in that same stitch. 1 and 2. Skip 2 stitches and slip stitch in the next and chain 3. 2 double crochets in the same stitch. There we go. As our chain 3. Skip 2 single crochets, slip stitch in the next and chain 3. And 2 double crochets in the same stitch as our chain 3. And this is our trim for our wicked washcloth. I should say wickedly warm if you're going to make it into a blanket, because it will make a really warm blanket stitch. Chain 3, 2 double crochets in the same stitch as our chain 3, skip 2 stitches and slip stitch in the next. And this is what we're going to do all the way around the edge of our washcloth. It just adds a fun little flair to it. And we'll just work our way, working all the way around all 4 sides, and we'll join back up over here. Now, one thing that might happen is that you end up with 1 or 2 extra stitches, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that when we get around here, because when you do an evenly single crocheted row around something, unless you count all your stitches and multiply to make sure you have the right amount, you may end up with more or less, all right? And I'll show you how to work with that when we get around there. I'm going to keep right on going, stitching this fun stitch all the way around the edge of my washcloth. I have stitched around the edge of my washcloth or doily with this fun stitch. I really like it. It's a lot of fun. I think it adds just a little bit of flair to the washcloth. But what happens at the end here, I actually have 3 stitches left, which works out good because I'm going to skip the next 2, because here's my chain 3 and my 2 double crochets in the same stitch. I'll skip those 2 and then join with the next one and then tie off. Now, if you don't have an exact number of stitches there, you can always skip 3 instead of 2, or if you're short 1 stitch, just skip 1 and put your slip stitch in the next stitch. It's still going to end up looking very pretty, and you're not going to worry too much about it because it's right there on that edge. And so if you're off by 1 or 2, it's not really a big deal. Just make sure, like I said, you may need to skip 3 or only 1 in order for it to equal out. And then I've already weaved in the other end, and I'm going to go ahead and weave in this end with my needle. And then I'll make sure all my other ends are tidied up, like this one here. I need to weave that in from where I stitched over, and make sure my washcloth or doily is all tidied up. So here are both of our wicked washcloths that I made. This was my test one, and this is the one we did today together. And they're super fun and have lots of uses. This is just a really good pattern because it looks the same on the front as it does on the back. That's where that name Reversible Blocks comes from. All right, and again, it has lots of different names, but who cares what the name is? It's a great pattern.